All right, welcome everybody back to another episode of the Big Doug and Carmi Show, getting you all set for your fantasy drafts. It's rookie dynasty time. Here to help us with all those things from fantasy pros and betting pros is Andrew Erickson. Andrew, how are you?
I'm doing excellent, guys. The groceries just came in right before the show, so we're fully stocked up, ready to be fueled to talk on this show. So I'm ready for it.
Always a good thing.
Very nice. What kind of fueling snacks you got in there?
Oh, nothing good. Basically, so tomorrow is my fiance's birthday, so I prep all the ingredients for a special dinner I'm putting together. And this time, luckily, Instacart got all the right ingredients. So shout out to them. They're gonna get a good tip this time, because sometimes you ask for an apple, they come back with 12 apples. You're like, I like apples, but not this much.
Yes, I had that happen with potatoes one time. I think I still have a 2-pound potato bag in the cupboard. Andrew, first time on the show. We're always curious to know kind of how you got started and why.
Yeah, so basically, I started working in fantasy full time back in 2018 with Pro Football Focus. So I've been doing part time work with them for a little bit, doing some data analysis, but then eventually a opportunity kind of arose where they were looking for someone for a fantasy position. So I applied to that, and at the time, I'd had a prior relationship with Jeff Ratcliffe, formerly of PFF, now with FTN. So he was with PFF for a very long time. So he kind of opened some doors for me. And unfortunately, I was only there for like a week until then. And then he moved on. He said that he didn't leave once I got hired. That was not his intention, even though I know that's a lie. He just didn't want to work with me. He was really intimidated by me is really the big selling point there. But yeah, PFF, I worked there for a couple years. It was basically right during COVID, because I had gotten furloughed from my quote unquote, real job. So I was kind of like bumming around. It's like, all right, well, I'm just going to just do fantasy research for a season that may or may not even happen. At that point, we didn't really know.
Okay.
So I'm doing all this research, hope this doesn't go to waste. But Roger Goodell, the NFL, if there's a will to make money, they will find a way. I mean, we have the NFL schedule release hyped up as the next NFL draft. I'm just waiting for schedule mocks to come out, next year, when people are going to be mock drafting the schedule. Like, who's going to play who? So that's kind of my start. And then 2 years ago, I ended up landing a job here at Fantasy Pros. So still full-time in the industry, filling the roles of, the great late Mike Tagliere, who I looked up to a lot, especially as a fantasy analyst and as a person and friend. So he's someone that I always kind of keep in mind whenever I get overwhelmed or stressed out. Again, at the end of the day, it's fantasy football, and we're providing a escape for people from their normal lives when, hey, I just want to listen to a podcast, because that's what I did. When I was stuck in my job, I didn't really like that much. I'd just be like listening to podcasts, listening to these guys talk about these guys running in their underwear at this NFL scouting combine, and why this running back sucks, and why this wide receiver is great. And I couldn't get enough of it. So I'm just so happy for this opportunity, and I'm happy to chop it up with you guys today.
We've had a bunch of people on from Fantasy Pros. Some of my favorite people work there. Is it you work at both Fantasy Pros and Betting Pros? Is that generally what it is for everybody at Fantasy Pros?
I think so. I mean, Betting Pros is kind of like the sister site of Fantasy Pros. So it's just kind of where we host all of our betting content. Now, you don't necessarily need to be, if you work for Fantasy Pros, like you have to write on Betting Pros, because some people just don't, contribute into the betting space per se. I've kind of embraced it. I think it's kind of fun to look at everything through a different lens, through a betting lens, because it's a marketplace, right? There's a legitimate marketplace that tells you what is going to happen, quote unquote, or what people think is going to happen. And it's fun to kind of look at this and be like, well, I think this is going to happen instead. And, is there an opportunity here for me to expose the market in an area where I think that it's not right, or the market is overconfident in this area? So I'm from Massachusetts, so we legalized sports wagering last year. So this last season for football was like the first year I was able to actually like wager on games in the traditional betting on spreads, totals, parlays, doing all that fun stuff. And I had a lot of fun doing it. Like, I thought it was a really cool experience. I was writing the Betting Pros Primer, which kind of mimics and mirrors the Fantasy Pros Primer that my colleague Derek Brown writes every single week. God bless his soul and his children and his wife. Doesn't sleep on Thursdays, even though we do a show. Like Thursday morning, like, hey, you've been up all night? He's like, you know it. But yeah, I contribute to both sites, and I know that anyone that writes at Fantasy Pros usually has an opportunity to write at Betting Pros as well.
This is a safe place. We ask all the fantasy folks this question: how many leagues will you be in this year?
Hopefully less, because I'm getting married next month, so I have big commitments. Otherwise, it's not fantasy football related. But basically, what I do is my pivot here is just make it best ball. Like if I don't
Mm.
check my team, I can be in as many leagues as I want. So I think best ball has really catered to the maybe the analyst per se, whoever is in the analyst chair. It's really nice to have best ball teams. You just draft the team, you get all the fun out of drafting it, and then you don't have to worry about it ever since then. So again, I have to usually say no to people that want me to be in their leagues. And there's a couple of home leagues I stay in because either I've never won them yet, and I'm like, I'm not leaving this league until I win. Like I just refuse to quit. I need to win at least one time, and then I can just walk off into the sunset. So until that happens, I'm kind of stuck in still like 7 to 8 leagues that I still have to do waivers. I mean, Tuesday nights, I like look at myself in the mirror. I'm like, am I really about to go through all these waivers? Now, luckily, Fantasy Bros has a lot of great tools with waivers, so it makes it much, much easier. I can't imagine without the tools on Fantasy Pros what my Tuesday nights would be. Like, they'd be even more miserable.
We're starting to hear best ball is more and more of a popular thing in the industry circles because it's basically you have a thrill of the draft, but without the maintenance of scheduling the players every single week.
Yeah, exactly.
So speaking of hard work, we're talking about D-Bro working these late nights and kind of working deep into the evening. I think Fantasy Pros, to be in my honest opinion, is the industry standard in regard to like having these composite boards and putting up these fantasy rankings. I'm just curious, Andrew, like when do you start that process? Like I already saw your rookie board up, the ECR board's already up there. I was just curious, are you already starting on 2025? What's the process? Are you studying film? Are you looking at data? Like what does Andrew Erickson do to prepare these dynasty boards for the upcoming year?
So it really does get pushed back until after the NFL season. So it's really more of a playing catch up. It's a sprint because the entire NFL season is a sprint. And the way that the NFL has manipulated the market, it's NFL is in the public eye 24/7 every single day. Like there are playoffs going on in other sports, apparently.
Apparently.
I didn't know. Because I need to write an article about the NFL schedule tonight.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's what I'm going to be doing at 8:00. Like the schedule drops, right? Let's get that article out. Let's get that reactionary piece out. Like that's what I'm going to be doing. And there are playoffs going on in other sports, but the NFL it's this conglomerate where it's basically we want all the attention on us 24/7, and we're going to do everything in our power to make it so. I mean, the rookie mini camp highlights for guys just like going out catching passes. They're like, oh my god, this guy's amazing. Like he's out catching passes. So it's just the hype. But I mean, that's why I love it because people get so excited and it makes it so much fun to talk about it. What's this rookie going to do? What's this team going to do? And I just love that aspect of it. So for me, it is really a sprint though, when it comes to, because I'm going up basically until the Super Bowl. And it's right after the Super Bowl, I try to catch my breath. And then it's like, all right, now February, March, April, I got to catch up on the draft. Usually starts with doing some mock drafts, getting an understanding of where the landscape is. I kind of like doing a couple of kind of like overarching pieces where it's kind of like I'm not ranking the players and be like, hey, here are the names that I'm trying to get to know that you should get to know. If you are also kind of more dedicated to the NFL season, not really a college football watcher, I always tell myself like, hey, like maybe I'll try to watch a little bit more college football this year. And then I'm like, wait, I want to have a wife. Like if I give away my Saturdays, then I'm going to be a divorced man very, very, very soon. So
Exactly.
I have to give up Saturdays because Sundays obviously are going to be working days for me. But that's kind of my process. And luckily it hasn't, I would like to do more with the college game, but like I said, it's just a time commitment thing. And there also, we have people on staff. Thor Nystrom is a dedicated NFL draft analyst and college football expert. I mean, this guy, he knows two things: breathing and college football. Like that's Thor Nystrom for you. So he's someone I lean on a lot. Hey, what's your perspective? Because he's looking at it from a different eye, where he's watching it as a college football versus, I'm watching it on the tape, like rewinding. It's a little bit different. So he offers great perspective. And that's kind of what I use. We have a lot of great analysts at Fantasy Pros and at Betting Pros, and I take advantage of it. Like I'm not only just an analyst and an employee there, but like I'm a user. Like I use the tools, I read the articles, because if it makes me smart, it's going to make me a better analyst and make you a better player as well.
It's funny because that's exactly the premise of this podcast. Let's get smart people on, pepper them with questions, and see if we can't get a little bit smarter by the end. Also, Thor, a great friend of the show. Not many dudes brighter on the planet than that guy. Will agree with you there. Andrew, when people do their fantasy drafts, what do you think is like the biggest mistake people make? We all have strategies when we go in and the draft starts. A lot of people throw those strategies out. What's the biggest mistake do you think people make when they're doing their drafts?
I think for me, it's probably like reaching on certain players and not really kind of waiting for the draft to kind of fall to you. I mean, think about it. Like, who do we always give the best grades to when it comes to the real NFL draft? Is the guys that, oh, well, I just took the highest guy when he fell to me. Like,
Right.
and I didn't go on a bold stand. Now, there are times where you feel like you can be taking a bold stand on certain players, but ADP is a tool. It's not only something that you kind of draft off of, whether you're looking at ESPN or Sleeper or Yahoo or whatever platform you're using. Like, it's information from the market. The market is telling you, hey, we've run 1,000 simulations, and this is the average draft position of these players. Like, there's some semblance of accuracy to that. Now, it's not always right, and you have to kind of stray from it at times, but especially at the top, like, you don't need to be like super, super bold. And you will find pockets, especially later on, where you really want to scoop up value. And I think that when you're just too aggressive, especially early on in drafts, that can kind of put you in the wrong direction. Where if you're just hitting doubles in the early on, like, you can get to the playoffs. Like, because once you get to the postseason, that's really all you need. That should be your goal. Like, that's my goal in every single one of my leagues is just make it to the playoffs, because anything can happen. I mean, look, last year, I specifically remember I was drafting with one of my friends, and I'm like, we're drafting Amari Cooper no matter what, because we've been on the opposite side of an Amari Cooper monster game in the playoffs, and I refuse to miss that. And what do you know what happened? Amari Cooper had the literally monster game in the playoffs. I was like, that's why we drafted him, because not because of his season-long outlook, not because he was super inconsistent the entire year, but I was like, I'm not missing out on this guy who could blow up in the playoffs. And that's the other thing too, is not over-evaluating or overvaluing early season production. You don't win your fantasy league in September and October.
Right.
You can't. So you have to really look at it from, hey, in November and December, what guys are going to be firing on all cylinders? That's why it's also important to work like the waiver wire and things like that. So for me, I think that it's always trying to look up for value and using a value-based strategy, because, you'll talk about whether it's late round quarterbacks, whether it's going heavier on running backs or receivers. Let the draft fall to you, I think, is one of the best strategies you can employ.
Do you have a favorite team? Have you kept that favorite team?
Yeah, so luckily for me, right as I kind of got right into the full-time role, the Patriots started to be really bad. So it was really easy for me to like transition away from like being a fan, because like, well, this team isn't good anyway. So I could just stop being a fan and really dive into the analyst role. So again, but I am still a Patriots fan, and I would be lying if I wasn't saying like, hey, I'm excited about this new era. Like, I've never been part of, or the one time I was part of a new quarterback was the Mac Jones era, and that flamed out very, very quickly. So 3 years in, 3 years out, and that's done. But now it's kind of a different territory where the Patriots had a top 3 pick. Like, Mac Jones was a mid-first rounder, and historically speaking, like, those quarterbacks have not hit at a high rate. And that's what we saw with Mac Jones. And was it all of his fault? Not necessarily, but it just wasn't going to work there. So now they're inserting another quarterback that I guess considerably has much more upside than Mac Jones. That's what I think in my analysis of Drake May. But now it's exciting to see all these young players, and even in the post Bill Belichick, because now it's like, it's officially like everything is new. Like, they've taken down all the do your job types of things, the mantra from Bill Belichick. It's over. So it's Gerard Mayo. He's taking over. Elliott Wolf, new quarterback. So yeah, I'm very excited to just kind of see something different from the Patriots. And it's funny, one of the things that one of the rookies, or Christian Gonzalez, the cornerback they drafted last year, he was referencing the how the rookies don't have to wear the crappy numbers anymore, because that's what Bill Belichick would do. You'd have to earn your number. So you'd see in training camp, Christian Gonzalez like wearing like 56. You're like, wait, why is he wearing this number? Because they had to earn their numbers. Now, I think that's a fine idea, but like from like a merchandise standpoint, like the Patriots must have hated that. They're like, wait, so you're telling me we can't sell these jerseys until like right before the season starts? So again, I think that there are other ways that you can like have a rookie earn his role. That doesn't necessarily need to be because of the numbers, but it's just nice to be like, hey, like Drake May's wearing 10. Like, great. Like,
is May going to play this year? Are you drafting him for next year?
I think I'd probably focus on drafting him for next year. I think that the Patriots, what they've said about about Drake May, what Gerard Mayo said, what Elliott Wolf has said, is they're following a Green Bay Packers type of approach with the quarterback. They've preached patience. And I think that given the state of the current roster, a lot of question marks, a lot of young players, which could work out really well or just not be a really conducive environment for quarterbacks. And I think, too, there's a bit of gamesmanship you have to play here if you're the Patriots when it comes to, okay, we have a defensive head coach, right? Gerard Mayo. So if we play Drake May, right, and he just balls out and he's just like amazing, well, Alex Van Pelt is gone. Like that offensive coordinator is going to get hired from somebody else like right away. So you almost got to be like, we have to get enough of Drake May behind the scenes and maybe put him out a little bit at the end of the year to get a tease, but not enough where we're going to get Alex Van Pelt and this offensive coaching staff poached by another team. So that's something that you also have to keep in mind. Like it's not about winning games this year. It's about building a foundation, building a franchise from the ground up, and recapturing what made the Patriots so great in all those years between Belichick and Brady at the top of their game. So again, it's not about winning and losing. It's about, hey, can Drake May be our franchise quarterback? And does he offer enough upside to, hey, we're going to have to go toe-to-toe with Patrick Mahomes this week. Like, can he do it? So those are the question marks that they have to answer. It's very less about like, because it doesn't matter to me how many games they win. It's like, well, is Drake May the answer? Like that's really, and if they find out that answer and the answer is yes, then it's been a successful season.
Andrew, I always find it funny when we kind of make decisions on the past where, we got burnt in fantasy or you had a successful week one time. So I'm just curious, is there a fantasy player that has burnt you in the past that's off your list that you're not going to draft this year? Is there someone that you absolutely love who like you're going to have on all of your teams, you're going to have heavy investment in for all your teams?
Yeah, so this one's tough because I feel like I've gone in too strong of a direction both times where like a guy's burned me or I was like really high on a guy. Like this happened to me with 2 years ago was Cortland Sutton. Yeah. So I was like drinking like Russell Wilson, Cortland Sutton was going to ball out. And the thing that bothers me the most was because it didn't work out in year one, I was like Rich Sutton off so hard, was not going to draft him, even though he was like super cheap because everyone was doing the same thing. Mm-hmm. And then what did he do this past year? Catches 10 touchdowns. Right. So I'm like, I'm trying to keep that in mind where it's like, yes, it hurts to get burned by a player, but then if it hurts everybody, then he's going to be really cheap the next year. And like, you got to keep that in mind. It's like, and he still had Russ and it was like, okay, like the play is now, but now there's no risk associated with it. So I try to keep that stuff in mind where, and again, I was like driving the Cortland Sutton bus. So I felt like I can't come on to shows and be like, yeah, I'm driving Cortland Sutton again. Like people are going to be like, Erickson, what are you doing? Like take lock, you got to move on. But the numbers would have shown like, hey man, like he's just due for regression when it comes to touchdowns. Like he has to catch more touchdowns. It's exactly what he did. Every time he caught a touchdown, someone was tagging me in his touchdown catch on Twitter. Like it was a constantly, I was like, guys, I know he just caught another touchdown. Like I know it hurts me every single time, but I'm obviously happy for the guy. But for me, someone that I was high on last year that didn't deliver, and he's kind of a guy I look at as like a make or break is Christian Watson. Actually, our Fantasy Pros account just tweeted something out about from one of our other shows. I was talking about Christian Watson as a sleeper, and because it's exactly what he is, like a post type sleeper. It's all dependent on do his hamstrings work? Like that's really what we're banking on with Christian Watson, because we saw his rookie year when he had Aaron Rodgers as the guy, he was dominant. Like he was putting up wide receiver 1 production at the end of the season when he was healthy. Last year, again, he was looked at as the number 1 receiver on the Packers. And the question was, oh, well, how good is Jordan Love going to be? But now we've seen a year of Jordan Love. It's like, okay, like we feel pretty confident the quarterback can fuel fantasy success for Christian Watson. Now it's a matter of, okay, can Christian Watson just get on the field? Because I think that he does offer something a little bit different than all the other Packers players, but it's a little bit different situation now where if you drop Christian Watson in that offense, well, now Jaden Reed and the tight ends and Dontavian Wicks and like the running backs, like they're now kind of proven a little bit more. It's like last year we didn't know what to expect. And this year we're like, hey, we're excited about this young and upcoming offense. But Christian Watson, I think still when he's healthy, I think he can be the best out of that offensive unit. It's just a matter of can he get on the field, because we saw that upside his rookie year that is just absolutely tantalizing.
How do we compare the Jordan you brought up, the Packers? I'm curious your thoughts on Jordan Love. It was like a tale of two halves of a season. Are we sure that Jordan Love will be the same guy he was in the second half? What do we make of Jordan Love heading into the season?
I think that we can be more comfortable with him based on what he did in the second half of the year. It was funny, and this is where the advantages of like looking at things from like a betting perspective come in. One of the things I had looked at was the Packers were one of the worst teams at like scoring in the first half. Like it was like every single, and I remember specifically like the week that I was like all in on the bet, like the first half under was against the Steelers, right? Another team that like could not score in the first half. So I'm like, guys, like this is a lock. And of course, it's like 25 points scored in the first half because that's just how betting works. But it's something I didn't forget about. It was like the way that the coaching staff was preparing Love with more scripted plays. Again, in the first half, that's when you're running more of, hey, this is what we practice versus, hey, this is the game situation, which is more what you do in the second half. Like that showed me a lot. Whereas like the coaching staff, I think, was actually letting him down. Like I don't think they were putting him in a position to succeed. And then you saw as they got more comfortable with Jordan Love and he got more comfortable in the system and with the coaching staff from LaFleur and the receivers, I think that the second half isn't a mirage. Like I do think Jordan Love like is a good quarterback. And I liked drafting him last year as like a late round guy because I thought that, hey, this guy had a really exciting ceiling at the college level. And I know that he didn't look great in like his 1 or 2 starts in the NFL, but you can't like those random starts in COVID games are so hard to like, oh yeah, this one game is going to like, this is the rest of his career, right? It's so hard to parse between which is like, hey, this guy, when I looked back at my analysis of him when I was writing like part-time for websites about Jordan Love, was like, this guy should sit. And I think that he has a ceiling when he plays. And ultimately that's what ended up happening. And he threw a ton of touchdowns last year. He had a young up and coming offensive unit around him. And the fact that he did it all without Christian Watson for the most part, I think was really impressive. So I think that is a key thing to note, that he did improve in the second half. You'd rather have it that way than the other way around, where he's good in the first half and then, defense will figure him out, and then he's not as good. So I think that ending on a strong note is definitely more of a takeaway and more of a better projection for him as we look ahead to 2024.
Gotcha. Andrew, what rookies are kind of tantalizing for you? Like, obviously we have the big ones like Marvin Harrison and Rome Odunze and things of that nature. Is there a rookie that you're really high on that just fell into a great situation? And then, conversely, is there a rookie that you would stay away from because they were in a bad situation?
Yeah, for me, it's Xavier Worthy. I loved him at Texas. I thought that he was like the next coming of a better version of Marquise Brown. And it's ironic because now Marquise Brown is his teammate in Kansas City. But I was like, for me, it was like if Marquise Brown was like super dynamic and like elusive, like Marquise Brown with like a Deshaun Jackson mold to him, like that's what I saw in a Xavier Worthy. And I was like, and then he goes to the Chiefs, right? And from all the teams that could have traded the pick is the Bills, right? It's the Bills like, Buffalo, what are we doing? Like you traded the pick so they could get Mahomes, and now you're going to trade the pick so they can get Xavier Worthy. And I'm just trying not to overthink it, right? People are going to look at, Xavier Worthy's too small. Like he's not a great downfield receiver. And it's like, look, we don't need to overthink this. Like Patrick Mahomes is the greatest NFL quarterback on the planet. And he just got a guy with this super dynamic skill set that, okay, like imagine if I feel like he was almost like penalized because he ran the fastest 40-yard dash, because then he got bucketed with all the other guys that ran fast 40-yard dashes that just 100%. Weren't good at football. Like they weren't good, but it's like he was good at football and also just happens to be really fast. Like that's like a second part of his game. And I think that it's just shown by how elusive he is and how good of a punt return and kick return he is. Like we see that a lot with some of these receivers that come out of college. Like that tells you what it's like. Just get this guy and get the ball in space. And this is what he can do in damage when people are trying to tackle him. That a player like that was Antonio Brown. Like Antonio Brown was a great kick return and punt return at the college level. And then obviously we saw what he became at the NFL level, one of the best receivers you've ever seen at the NFL game. So again, not saying Xavier Worthy is going to necessarily be Antonio Brown, but he just checks off all the boxes of things I'm looking for, except for the fact that he's just smaller. But the way that the NFL is transitioning with how can we protect the offense, like Tank Dell last year, like this is the NFL is transitioning to like, we want more of these guys on the field. Like we want more of the explosive playmakers. We want the big plays back. We want offense. And Xavier Worthy just like epitomizes like everything you'd want with a Patrick Mahomes-esque receiver. And the fact that Andy Reid brought up the Deshaun Jackson comps. I mean, like I put it out on Twitter a couple weeks ago. I was like, all right, Andy Reid, Xavier Worthy, Patrick Mahomes in the same offense. And I basically just clipped a bunch of Michael Vick to Deshaun Jackson highlights. Like, this is the offense. This is what Andy Reid, baby. Like, this is what's going to happen. So very excited about Xavier Worthy, and the fact too that Rashee Rice potentially going to face a suspension. That's going to give Worthy an early opportunity to produce and to get more involved in the offense. Rice, when you look at what he did last year, a lot of it was manufactured touches. And you know what you can't manufacture touches for? Guys that aren't practice. Like if he's literally not there, like they can't scheme him into the game plan because he's not there. So I think that they're going to have big plans for Worthy. There's a reason why they traded up to get him. And I just think that like when people comp him to John Ross and Mecole Hardman, it's just like, No, like
No.
those guys couldn't play. Like those guys, and I guess and to defend John Ross, like he was actually like pretty good, like when he wasn't hurt. Like he actually was somewhat productive when he wasn't hurt, but he was always banged up. So yeah, Xavier Worthy for me is a guy that I mean, when he got drafted to the Chiefs, I'm like, yes, like this is what we all wanted, and we're getting something super exciting. Now, when it comes to bad landing spots, I thought Brock Bowers landing in the Raiders was just a classic case of the Raiders like on the clock, like, oh, like he's here, like let's take him. And it's like
I said that 2 weeks ago.
like okay, he's here, like let's take him. And I'll never knock a team for taking, you know, the best player available, because I think that he was. But tight ends need to be used the right way. Like there's a certain way to deploy them. And you know, nobody was excited about Michael Mayer before the draft, right? To be like the Raiders tight end, like with all the receivers already there, with Aiden O'Connell / Gardner Minshew, like nobody was talking about Michael Mayer. And now all of a sudden, okay, we're gonna drop another tight end in there, and now we're gonna be excited about him. It's like, wait, like why does that work? I just think that with tight end, it's so landing spot dependent. Like imagine if Michael Mayer had gone to the Lions or the Bills.
Yeah.
Like he would be talked about like we talk about Sam Laporte and Dalton Kincaid, but he didn't. He drew the short end of the stick, got stuck with the Raiders, and now he's a backup on the team. So I think that Bowers is facing a major uphill battle, as talented as people say he is. And again, he was my tight end 1. Like I think that he's beyond every other tight end in this class, but it's just a matter of like how the targets are going to be distributed and like how good are the Raiders going to be. Like, are we really confident that Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew are really going to like orchestrate this offense with Devontae Adams also like commanding all the targets? Because it's like when they're in the huddle, Devontae's like, give me the ball. What is the quarterback going to do? Like, oh, sorry, I have to give this tight end that we drafted 13th overall. I got to give it to Bowers. Like, no, like that's not going to happen. So again, long term, you obviously need to be excited about him. But I mean, we did this game with Kyle Pitts. It's like, oh yeah, I'm drafting for the long term. It's like, okay, well, like we're still waiting for like it to finally happen. Maybe it happens this year, but yeah, Brock Bowers, I was very disappointed by the landing spot in Las Vegas.
Quick follow-up. So the Xavier Worthy stuff was fantastic. I'm glad to hear that because I drafted him at 110 today in one of my rookie drafts. I'm pretty pumped about that. So quick follow-up with that. So I have a young core. I have Jordan Addison, I have JSN, and I have Xavier Worthy are my 3, in addition to, I believe, Tyreek Hill. So I have a pretty strong core. Of those 3 younger quarterbacks, the sophomores and Worthy, which one is your favorite? Who do you think is going to have the biggest year, JSN, Jordan Addison, or Xavier Worthy, in your opinion?
I think it's still Xavier Worthy for me. Like I think that he just has an opportunity to just go nuclear in this Chiefs offense. And even if they decide to slow play it with him, that's what they did with Rashee Rice. And we saw Rashee Rice have an amazing second half of the season when they started getting him more involved. I just think that it's not going to take long. You know, week 1, right? We're all going to be watching Thursday Night Football. It's going to be the Chiefs against the Ravens. Xavier Worthy is going to do something worthy. Let's just leave it at that. And people are going to be like, oh my God, this guy is going to the moon. Like, awesome. So like, and you're going to see his value just like skyrocket. And that's kind of what we saw last year, but the converse version of it where Sky Moore was struggling in all facets and he couldn't do anything. And we're like, oh no, like this is the end. Like, cause I like Sky Moore a lot going into last year, but then after week 1, after that game, I was like, oh my God, what have I done? Like, this is going to go south real quick. And that's what happened. And he obviously did not end up firing. So I just don't think it's going to take very long for us to realize if Xavier Worthy is a hit or not. And if I was betting man, I am a betting man. And I have Xavier Worthy in a lot of spots too. I bet that he's going to hit.
Sounds good.
Yeah, I said that last week that it felt like, just to go back for a second, that the Raiders had totally expected Michael Penix to be there. And when he wasn't, to your point, they're like, what do we do now? Again, I'm a big Georgia fan, so I'm not going to disparage Brock Bowers or picking him, but it felt like they had totally planned on Penix being there and were just like, what do we do? Take this guy.
Yeah. So they take the best BPA. Like, who does Mel Kiper like? Let's take that guy. Like,
yeah, it's Austin Eckler and Brian Robinson Jr. in the backfield for the Commanders. Andrew, how do you see that kind of tandem playing out? And can you reasonably start either one of them?
So I like Brian Robinson Jr. better. I think that he is younger. I think that works in his favor. He was really productive last year at times. I know that we can't always bank on him like catching a couple balls and like ripping off these massive runs with them. But hey, like he did that. Give him credit. Whereas Eckler last year, I mean, Eckler looked like he just had no gas left. And Eckler has been very vocal even these last couple of years with the Chargers, where he's like, please, like, stop giving me so many touches. Like, please, like, I need a break. And I feel like we just kind of saw him break down last year. So how healthy was he? I don't know. My concern with Eckler is he's not the in between the tackles grinder. And that's really Brian Robinson's role. And when you insert a mobile quarterback into the offense, like a Jaden Daniels, like, that's going to open up holes for Brian Robinson to, I think, be really effective and be really efficient on the ground. So I think that's going to give him an advantage. Now, Eckler, his best skill is in the passing game. But again, the mobile quarterback is a double-edged sword when it comes to running back production. Yes, it can increase your yards per carry for a running back, but it's going to decrease the amount of targets that those running backs see in the passing game. So Brian Robinson, okay, that's fine. Like, we weren't expecting him to have like this massive target share in this offense with Eckler, with the mobile quarterback. Like, I want him to score touchdowns, and I want him to be efficient as a rusher, which I think he can do both with Jaden Daniels. But with Eckler, okay, he's not going to be the leading rusher in terms of carries. I don't think they're going to lean on him in the red zone, and I don't think he's going to catch a lot of passes from Jaden Daniels. So what is he doing there? Like, that's my concern with Eckler, who's also coming off one of the worst years of his career. Like, how much gas does he actually have left? So I think as the Commanders are obviously building a newer foundation with new coaches, new staff, new owners, yes, bringing a guy like Eckler, you know, a very prominent part of the NFL, makes sense. But I feel like he's really more there as a locker room type of guy, a locker room presence, a leadership presence, rather than, hey, we have to get the guy that we need to get the ball to this guy. Like, I don't really see that in this offense, specifically with Cliff Kingsbury, who, again, we haven't really seen him be like, oh, we got to pepper the running backs with targets. That's not really been his kind of claim to fame. It's really been like, hey, let's get this quarterback running. Like, and I think that's what's going to help him with Jaden Daniels.
I read the article. Is that what you have Jaden Daniels is your favorite for Offensive Rookie of the Year? Is that right?
Yep.
Read that?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that's because of the running immediate impact.
Yeah. I just think that he can do more on his own. I think he's going to be asked to do more on his own. You know, Caleb Williams like has the luxury of like, hey, I have all these like really good receivers. Like, I don't need to necessarily like put it all on my shoulders. Like, just get the ball out to my guys and they can be productive. Where Jaden Daniels, like, okay, like you have Terry McLaurin, he's good, but then you kind of have question marks and new pieces. And it's like, how will Jahan Dotson bounce back in year 3? Luke McCaffrey's a nice slot receiver. Ben Sinnot's a rookie tight end. So you have some pieces where it's like, okay, you can see things kind of working out, but ultimately it's going to fall on Jaden Daniels' shoulders and his legs to kind of get the job done behind the one thing with the Commanders that I'm concerned about is just like the tackles. Like that is a concern for me. And something they didn't really
concern for us too.
They didn't do a lot in the draft. So I was like, all right, fingers crossed. Like, let's keep this guy upright. But hey, if he can move, that's going to help him in the long run, not be stuck there like a sitting duck.
Speaking of McLaurin, I'm looking at the ESR board in Fantasy Pros. He's projected as wide receiver 30 with peers like T. Higgins, Tank Dell, George Pickens, Calvin Ridley. Do you see him as a better value? Or sorry, do you see Jahan Dotson as a better value? Because Jahan Dotson is ranked number 56. Jerry Jeudy, Brandon Cooks, Adam Thielen. Me personally, I see the Dotson upside more at a later pick than Terry McLaurin at 30 with his peers there. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, Terry McLaurin and Dotson are an interesting dichotomy because like McLaurin, like you feel like you're going to draft him wide receiver 30 and like that's what it'll probably be. Like you're not worried about like, oh, this guy's going to be a total bust. Like, no, he's like too proven. He's too good of a player to just bust. It's really been with McLaurin. It's just been a matter of the lack of ceiling with him. And it's not really his fault. It's always been kind of related to the shoddy quarterback play that he's had where it's, yes, last year, all they did was throw the ball, but it wasn't efficient. Like, it was just like all volume, but like, there was no like oomph or substance to the volume. It was like, okay, like we got all these pass attempts, but it's like not working out. So again, with a rookie quarterback, you don't want to over project like elite passing efficiency. So again, I think McLaurin's going to kind of be regulated back into that wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 range. But with Dotson, the thing with him is as a rookie, like he just has found like a knack for the red zone. Like he's been a guy that's been able to score touchdowns. And even last year, the thing that I remember, especially in the game against my Patriots, Jahan Dotson had a productive game because Curtis Samuel didn't play. Right. So like when they moved Jahan Dotson like more into the slot, it was a more of a natural position for him. Like you saw him be more productive. And when Curtis Samuel missed games, like he only missed 3 games, I believe, last year. But when he missed those games, like Dotson was targeted more. He was more productive. And it was kind of like a joke on fantasy Twitter at the time where it was like, so all we need is like Curtis Samuel to get hurt. And like Jahan Dotson like goes to like a top 24 receiver. Basically, it's like, yeah, pretty much like, because he was doing nothing when Curtis Samuel was healthy. So that's always like a red flag. It's like, okay, this one guy misses and you just can't do anything. But I think that the Washington offense had more problems than just with Jahan Dotson last year. I think that was the only issue. So I do think that he is kind of primed for a bit of a bounce back here. I do like his upside. He's definitely one of the guys I'm looking at as post-type sleeper, getting way cheaper than he was last year. I mean, last year, it's funny, we were comparing him, like his ADP was like right next to like Mike Evans last year.
He was high.
Yeah. And it's like, you look back and then you're like, oh my God, I drafted Dotson over Mike Evans. Oh no. And Mike Evans obviously scored like 14 touchdowns, like something absolutely ridiculous. So sometimes you swing and miss, but again, going back to my Cortland Sutton thing that I mentioned earlier, it's like, just because you were high on a guy, sometimes you're just a year too early.
Yeah.
Right? And that maybe you weren't wrong with the analysis. Like, he had the opportunities, he had the targets. So I think that, especially, adding Luke McCaffrey in as a slot guy, I don't think that's necessarily going to impact him too substantially. Now, if McCaffrey comes in as an absolute stud, then okay, that could be a reason why Dotson ultimately doesn't hit. But, I always like chasing after guys that had strong rookie years. I think that's telling when they first play, they hit the ground running. That same thing with Christian Watson. Like, I liked him a lot because he was really good his rookie year, took a step back his second year. So I like buying the year 3 bounce back with some of these guys.
Do you chase touchdowns, Andrew, or is like target share and like targets the more bigger telling stat in regard to success year over year?
Yeah, it's definitely more of the targets, the receiving yards, the efficiency. Like, touchdowns are probably actually the hardest thing to project year over year when it comes to the skill positions, receiver, running back, and tight end. Now, it's really better to look at the opportunities like near the end zone, right? How many red zone targets is this player getting? And it's weird because you almost want to chase guys that don't score a lot of touchdowns the year before, but still like see a lot of those opportunities. Like, the name that comes to mind is Tony Pollard, right? Like, he was essentially allergic to the end zone. Like, he just like couldn't score. Like, the end zone's right there, he's going to go down at the 1, like no matter what. It's because he was second in total red zone touches behind Christian McCaffrey. And you're like, McCaffrey, like, every single week it was like a joke, like what his betting odds were to score a touchdown is like, oh, now it's minus 300. Now it's like minus 400 to score a touchdown. And Tony Pollard was pretty close because people recognize in the books recognize like how many red zone touches he was getting. So it's like, we can't make it like super outlandish because he's getting all these red zone opportunities, but like the guy just could never score for some reason. So even on a new team, like, if Pollard does take on a red zone role with the Titans, like, you should expect him to score more touchdowns. Like, that's just kind of how things naturally work out when it comes to regression. The number one thing I learned in math in high school, and I use it every day, is regression. It's like, hey, regression to the mean. Like, if you're having a really bad day today, chances are you're going to have a really good day the next day because things are going to level out and even out. So something I always try to keep in mind in real life and fantasy football.
Andrew, we wrap all of these with this. The Commanders are at 6.5 for the win totals. You taking the over or the under?
Probably going to take the under on the 6.5.
That's okay.
What's the rationale, though?
Yeah.
So I don't remember. So I know I've done a decent amount of schedule analysis. So I don't think anything stuck out to me with the Commanders in terms of the strength of schedule that they have. I just know, like, I think for me, I do like the other teams in the NFC East a decent amount. I do like the Eagles to bounce back. I do like the Cowboys. There's always like a tough out as it is. New York, I don't really know what's going on there. We could see Drew Lock sooner rather than later. Some of my super flex teams like need Drew Lock like like really badly, and I'm like, oh my god, yeah, I've drafted Drew Lock in like my super flex rookie drafts because he's like available in the player pool. So drafting Drew Lock where I can. I just think that they still have a lot of moving pieces. Jaden Daniels is super exciting. But how much does that translate to wins is my concern, especially with the defense still kind of like overhauling. Just a lot of moving pieces. And I think that collectively may take some time. I think Washington is more concerned about, like, do we have the right guy at head coach? Do we have the right quarterback? And like, are we building the right culture? So for me, it seems kind of like we could see Washington do what happened to the Lions, like the first year that Dan Campbell took over.
Yeah.
Like, they didn't really win a lot of games, but like, you could see like the culture was established of this winning culture. And now we look up at the Lions and it's like, are the Lions like the prestige of the NFL? And that's kind of how it feels, like this team that just continuously over exceeds expectations in the betting markets and just kind of what we're expecting from them in general. And I mean, I feel like it's a win for everybody. I guess I can't speak for everybody, but like if the Lions won the Super Bowl, like I feel like everybody would be like, that's good. Like that makes it feel like we don't need the Chiefs to win again. Like we don't need that. We don't need them to win again. Like I think everyone would feel pretty good if the Lions were to win the Super Bowl. So again, Not to detract from the Commanders, but that's what I would say. I think that if they kind of followed the Lions path and what they have done, I think that's probably best for them and their total outlook.
I think Commanders fans would take that. George, did we miss anything?
I think we nailed it. Andrew, I appreciate it, man.
You're the best, man. Appreciate you. This was great.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay.